Game of Thrones, starting by hatching a giant dragon. Chapter 21. Encountering bandits on the road in the afternoon, the knights who had been sent out returned. They only brought back Jon's horse and news of a set of massive footprints. The horse looked clearly terrified, its mane matted with snow and mud, and half of its reins were broken. What was even more worrying, however, was the set of footprints. The knights had found the horse half a day's ride outside Winterfell, and the massive footprints were discovered nearby as well. They searched the snowy area for a long time but did not see any sign of Jon, finding only crushed snow tracks and several snapped trees behind a slope. "It looks like some kind of massive beast," the lead knight said, bracing himself. "But none of us have ever seen claw marks like that. They are terrifyingly large." Eddard crouched down to examine them, his fingers brushing over the grooves deeply embedded in the snow, his expression growing increasingly grim. These were tracks that no ordinary beast could have left behind, and he knew almost instantly what it was: a dragon. Eddard did not speak the word aloud. Winterfell was not yet ready to face this word. The news was too shocking and enough to change many things. He called the riders over and instructed them privately to keep the matter of the horse and the footprints secret, telling them only to say that Jon had gone to Castle Black ahead of schedule. Although the knights found it strange, they dared not ask questions. The decisions made by the Lord of the North were never to be questioned by others. Yet Eddard himself could not act as if nothing had happened. He summoned Robb to the study. When Robb heard that Jon had gone to Castle Black ahead of schedule, the expression on his face changed instantly. He frowned at first, then looked at Eddard as if remembering something, seemingly trying to find a more concrete answer in his father's expression. Eddard did not explain much, saying only that Jon had his own business to attend to and would not be in any danger. "But why didn't he tell us?" Robb asked. "He did not want to disturb others while they were sleeping," Eddard said. Robb opened his mouth as if to retort, but ultimately remained silent. Although he was not yet old, he had already learned how to judge when something was amiss. Eddard watched him. His children were all growing up, and each was growing in a different direction. Arya kept complaining about going out to play without taking her along. Catelyn sat to the side, comforting the children while sharing the burden of those unspoken anxieties with Eddard. When Coldfire flew, the wind was strong. When she spread her wings, the airflow ripped backward from both sides, as if an entire invisible wall had been abruptly flattened. Jon lay prone against her neck, able to feel how every beat of her wings lifted him upward before settling steadily back into the air. He had been flying for a day. When they stopped at night, they would choose a remote valley or coastline, keeping as far away from civilization as possible. They flew during the day and rested at night. Coldfire would go off to find her own prey. Jon would roast dried meat by the firelight, his gaze drifting to her unconsciously. After several years, he and the dragon now shared a psychic connection. Sometimes he would call out in his mind and the dragon would return to his side. Jon kept looking at the map. He had Coldfire fly south from the north, crossing the Neck and the Riverlands and then across the Narrow Sea. Pentos was still far away, but the Narrow Sea itself was not the most dangerous part. The real trouble was the towns, fleets, or people who would sell news of a dragon to any side they might encounter along the way. With every day they flew south, he was one step closer to Dany and one step further from Winterfell. At dusk on the third day, he encountered a band of bandits. The mountain area was very remote. The wind poured down from the slope, blowing the trees on the hillside askew, and loose stones kept rolling down. Jon was crouching by the fire eating when, at that moment, a few light sounds came from the distance. Like stones rolling down from a rock wall. He looked up, and almost at the same time his hand went to the hilt of Longclaw. Three men came around from behind the rock wall. They were dressed in rags, their faces full of traces left by the elements and hunger, but they still held their weapons. Scimitars, hand axes, longbows. At a glance one could tell they were not passing travelers but bandits who specialized in preying on lone targets. The man in the middle first sized Jon up, then looked at the pack he had placed on the ground and grinned. "All alone?" he asked happily. "Good luck," another bandit said, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth and laughing heartily. Jon did not respond, only slowly standing up and drawing Longclaw. As the blade left the scabbard, a cold light flashed across the snow. The three men were clearly stunned for a moment, then laughed even louder. The archer immediately circled to the side while the axeman pressed forward directly, as if determined to intimidate him first and then deal with him slowly. "Lost," Jon said. The three bandits did not make him nervous. He had faced far more wildlings before. No one listened to him. The axeman rushed up first, swinging his axe down at his head. Jon dodged to the side and the axe blade smashed heavily into the ground, sending gravel flying. He seized the opportunity to thrust forward and Longclaw pierced directly into the opponent's side. The man only had time to let out half a scream before he stumbled and fell to his knees, blood quickly soaking the rags on his chest. The archer immediately drew his string and fired. The arrow grazed past Jon's shoulder and embedded itself in a tree behind him. The second bandit took advantage of this opening to pounce, his blade slashing straight for Jon's neck. Jon shifted his feet, Longclaw first slicing open the man's wrist and then following through to cut toward his shoulder. The man recoiled in pain, his expression changing instantly. The ferocity he had just shown was cut in half. The third man saw that things were going poorly and turned to try and slip away. But he had only taken one step when the sky suddenly darkened. Coldfire had returned. The white dragon swooped down from high above. The wind pressure hit the ground first, making even the gravel on the slope jump. When she landed, the whole mountain shook. A patch of snow exploded and their retreat was completely cut off. The bandit who was preparing to flee had just turned back when he was enveloped by Coldfire's shadow. Before he could even steady his blade, white flames were already erupting from the dragon's mouth. A massive flash of fire appeared and screams rang out, echoing through the mountains. The remaining two were completely panicked and turned to run. Jon caught up to the one who had been injured at the start and pierced his body with a single sword thrust, his movements clean and efficient. The last one was swept to the ground by Coldfire's tail. Just as he struggled to get up, Jon was already upon him. Longclaw fell and the battle was completely over. The mountainside quieted down again, leaving only the sound of the wind and the smell of blood lingering in the air. Jon stood in place, his chest heaving a few times, and raised his hand to pat the dragon's scales. Then he walked over and searched the bodies, finding a few gold dragons, a short dagger, and some hardened dry rations. Jon packed what he could take into a bag and then looked up at Coldfire. Jon walked over and pressed his hand against her scales. "Let's go." He needed to leave here and set up camp elsewhere. Coldfire responded with a low sound. That night, they set up camp again on a further hillside. Chapter 22. The dragon descends on Pentos. As the wedding approached, Daenerys became increasingly restless and suffered from insomnia every night. The days in Pentos were hot and stifling, while the nights often carried a damp chill. She lived in Illyrio Mapatys' estate, surrounded by people busy preparing for the wedding. Weavers, handmaidens, merchants, servants carrying crates, and those attendants draped in Dothraki shawls with voices as sharp and rough as knives. They all bustled about her. Everyone talked about the wedding, the gifts, and called Drogo, as if her life had already been laid out on a table, just waiting for the right day to be served. She longed to escape, but there were too many guards around her, and she had no idea where she would go if she left. Worse still, Viserys was like a powder keg ready to explode at any moment. He spent his days huddled with Illyrio Mapatys, plotting how to send the Dothraki to Westeros once the alliance was solidified. His eyes would light up when he spoke of the throne, as if he were already sitting on that iron seat, needing only someone to truly push it before him. Every time Dany saw him, she would subconsciously avoid him. She knew her brother was becoming increasingly unstable, and she knew that if she said the wrong thing, it could lead to even more humiliating consequences. Yet, the only one she truly relied on was Aegon. Looking back, after those first few times she dreamed of Aegon and Coldfire, those dreams seemed to take on a life of their own and began to recur. Every time she woke up, she couldn't tell if they were omens or just hallucinations born from her near breaking point. But regardless, she wrote them down time and again, like clutching a thin thread. Even if that thread might snap at any moment, she did not want to let go. "If you're truly coming for me, then come faster," she whispered as she sat on the bed. She did not know if Aegon would come, or when, or perhaps he was merely a figment of her imagination. Even during the day, she could not help but drift off outside the door, imagining a white dragon and Aegon soaring across the sky. One morning, not long before the wedding, Illyrio Mapatys hosted a feast in the garden with the tables laden with fruits, honey, cakes, cheese, olives, and spiced wine. The merchants were all smiles, as if everything had already fallen into place, while Viserys sat to the side pretending to be a king. In reality, he had long since lost his patience. Ser Jorah stood in the distance, his expression cautious, seemingly ready to shield her from any unnecessary trouble at any moment. Illyrio Mapatys was still rambling on about gifts and guests when suddenly a commotion arose outside. First came a faint, strange noise from the distance, followed by someone screaming. The next instant, a low roar came from the sky. Some kind of colossal creature was flying high above, the air being constantly torn apart by enormous wings. "What is going on?" Viserys frowned first. A servant stumbled into the garden, his face pale, practically collapsing to the ground. A dragon is coming." When these words fell, the air seemed to stand still. Daenerys abruptly looked up, hardly daring to believe what she had heard. The next moment, the distant sky was slashed open by a white silhouette. Its wingspan was immense, and the shadow it cast as it swept over the city nearly covered half the street. Screams rose up in layers across Pentos, like waves crashing against city walls. Horses neighed, servants fled, and guards were thrown into chaos. Scree! The roar pressed down from high above like a storm bursting in a throat. Low-frequency vibrations spread through the air, and the entire city responded to this breath-like bellow. Yet Dany just stood there, her heart pounding as if it had been struck hard by something. Coldfire. She could see it clearly. The white scales, the sound of the wind whipped up as it circled in the sky, exactly the same as in her dreams. It really came. She whispered, the words tumbling out almost without consciousness. After seeing the giant dragon in the sky, Viserys was already trembling with excitement, as if the entire dragon were meant for him. He grabbed Dany's shoulders, his voice filled with ecstasy, incoherent. "Did you see that, Dany? The dragon has returned. She has come for me." But Daenerys was not listening to a word he was saying. She only watched the white dragon circle the sky above the city time and again before flying toward the hills in the north and landing on a small hill. "Ser Jorah," she said, almost blurting it out, "follow it." Jorah glanced at her, asked no further questions, and immediately turned to prepare the horses. They chased it all the way to the highlands outside the city. By the time they arrived, Coldfire had already landed on the hillside. She folded her wings and lowered her body like a white mountain. Viserys practically jumped off his horse, his eyes filled with excitement and greed, completely oblivious to the dangerous low rumbling in the dragon's throat. "Are you here for me?" he practically shouted. Coldfire ignored him, her massive eyes fixed on everyone standing below the hill, and let out a warning scream. Everyone present who heard the dragon's roar was terrified, trembling uncontrollably, and the horses were startled into scattering in all directions. Amidst the clamor, the dragon's gaze simply passed over Viserys, over Jorah, over Illyrio Mopatis and those trembling servants, and landed on Daenerys. In that moment, Daenerys felt her throat tight, her hands clenched, and she walked forward step by step. With every step, it was as if she were confirming she was not dreaming. Coldfire. She whispered. The dragon let out a low hiss in response, hot air venting from her nostrils. Then everyone saw a person on the dragon's back. He stood there, the wind blowing his cloak and hair, revealing the face of a young man, deep gray eyes calm to the point of being sharp, his frame tall and sturdy like a long sword unsheathed in the wind, his pale complexion making that face appear all the more stern. She suddenly felt her heartbeat skip a beat, and then as if it had suddenly come back to life. Aegon. She hardly dared to speak. The youth leaped from the dragon's back, his movements as steady as if he had done it 1,000 times before. He stood beside Coldfire, reached out to stroke the dragon's head, and then looked down at her. At that moment, Dany finally confirmed that the dream was real. All those images that kept repeating in the night, they were not hallucinations from being trapped for too long, they were all real. "Daenerys Targaryen," he said. His voice was very soft, yet it felt as if it had some power that struck straight into her heart. Viserys was completely stunned. "Who are you?" The ecstasy on his face was quickly replaced by confusion. Aegon did not look at him, but first looked at Dany, then at Jorah, and finally landed his gaze steadily on Viserys. "You may call me Aegon Targaryen." The wind blew across the hillside, leaving the few people there in silence, yet Dany did not feel surprised at all. She just gazed at him, her eyes suddenly growing warm. That warmth was not because of fear, but because she had finally waited for the person who had appeared time and again in her dreams. She almost wanted to rush over immediately, but forced herself not to. Many messy thoughts swirled in her mind, finally merging into one. She finally did not have to face all of this alone, and Aegon stood beside Coldfire. He had come to Pentos. Chapter 23. The dragon descends on Pentos. To its mine. Viserys had gone completely mad, stumbling forward, not even hearing Jorah's attempt to stop him. "Dragon came for me, didn't it? I am the descendant of the Dragon Kings." Coldfire let out a low growl, the hot air puffing from her nostrils instantly causing the surrounding horses to back away in unison. Jorah's expression changed, and he hurriedly blocked Daenerys, whispering, "Your Grace, don't get too close." Daenerys did not move. She only looked at the dragon, then at the young man who had dismounted from its back. Jon stood beside the dragon Coldfire, his white cloak billowing in the wind. "You came." Daenerys' body felt a bit weak, and she said in a trembling voice, "I have come for you." His voice was like a freshly sharpened short sword, clear and tempered with cold, hard strength. The words were light, yet they instantly relaxed the string that had been pulled tight in her heart for so long. She took a few steps toward him almost instinctively, but Viserys rushed forward first, wearing that familiar, maddening look that made her stomach turn cold. "Who is he?" he roared, demanding. "Why is he riding my dragon?" Jon finally turned his gaze, looking expressionlessly at Viserys Targaryen. "Your dragon? You want my dragon?" "Yes, this is the dragon of House Targaryen. Hand her over to me at once," Viserys said, feigning arrogance. Hearing his words, Jon placed his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist, his eyes narrowing as he looked at him, as if he might strike at any moment. Viserys glanced back at his guards, opening his mouth as if to say something more, but when he met the gaze of Coldfire's cold purple eyes, the corners of his mouth stiffened for a moment, and he dared not make another sound. Even when the dragon was just lying there quietly, her massive body still brought a powerful sense of oppression. "I am the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Elia Martell, the current head of House Targaryen." As soon as these words fell, Magister Illyrio gasped, and Jorah's expression changed completely. Jon looked at Daenerys. "I have many things to ask you. Let's leave this place first." Upon hearing this, Viserys temporarily set aside his fear of the dragon, his face immediately darkening. "You want to command a true dragon?" "By what right?" Jon looked at him, his voice very calm. "By the right that I brought the dragon." Viserys seemed to be choked by something, opening his mouth to curse, but he was silenced by Coldfire, who lowered her dragon head slightly, causing him to instinctively take half a step back. Seeing this, Daenerys felt completely relieved. Although the real trouble had not yet begun, looking at Jon and seeing his dragon, the problems that had been plaguing her for this period of time would cease to exist. The wind blew across the hillside, ruffling the dragon's scales, her cloak, and her heart that was almost shattering. Jon reached out his hand toward her. "Come here to me, Dany." She looked at that hand, finally slowly raising her own, grasping it and interlocking their fingers. In that very moment the sky over Pentos was gradually illuminated by the morning light, and the distant sea began to turn white. Coldfire let out a low cry, spreading her wings, the white shadow of which almost cast the entire hillside into shade. Daenerys knew that from this day on her life would no longer be at the mercy of others as it had been before. For Jon, who had always lived in the land of wind and snow, the weather in Pentos made him very uncomfortable. It was too hot and even the air seemed to be burning. He had already taken off his heavy black cloak, which made him slightly more comfortable, but he still felt like he was about to melt. Being beside a pure girl, he couldn't just take off all his clothes or it would be too presumptuous. He tried hard to restrain himself from paying too much attention to Daenerys, though deep inside an impulse welled up to walk to her side, take her hand, help her on a cold fire and fly away into the distance, but he suppressed this thought. When the Magister of Pentos had tents and comfortable chairs brought out from the estate, it was already near noon. Although this most powerful Magister repeatedly assured them of their safety, Jon still refused to enter the city. "I want to discuss a few things with you now." Jon's voice, clear and tempered with cold, hard strength, rang out. "I do not trust others easily. Before entering the city I want to talk to you first to ensure that you are not the kind of people who would cut my throat in the night." Jon stared meaningfully at Viserys. The Beggar King's gaze was very uncomfortable, and ever since he arrived here he had been secretly sizing him up, his look disgusting. "Of course," he continued. "If you intend to kill me, you must know that the bond between a dragon and her rider is very close. If I meet with any misfortune within your walls, she will unleash all her fury upon the city." Coldfire, who shared a telepathic bond with him, understood his intention and knew that Jon was consolidating his ruling position, so she spat a burst of scorching dragonfire into the air as a response to his threat. Jon was satisfied with the wary and fearful gazes they cast toward the dragon. They must be made to know the fury of foolishly offending a dragon. Coldfire would burn the entire city of Pentos and everyone within it to ashes. Magister Illyrio's servants were busy bringing many things, and during this time almost no one spoke. Viserys seemed to be silently digesting all of this, his gaze frequently shifting between Jon and Coldfire. His gaze, most of all, was filled with obvious longing as it rested on the dragon. The knight escorting Daenerys by the horses looked familiar to Jon, but he couldn't recall who it was for a moment. When Magister Illyrio's servants finally brought out the tents, chairs, and food, and had everything set up, Jon sat directly on an extremely soft cushion, with Viserys, Magister Illyrio, and Daenerys opposite him, along with some other magisters who had arrived later, all sitting on similar cushions. The somewhat familiar knight stood behind the Targaryen siblings, and food and wine were quickly brought up for them to enjoy. Coldfire curled up on the ground beside the tent, her violet eyes scanning them all, while Jon leaned against her head, carelessly stroking her scales. The dragon responded softly to his stroking, letting out a comfortable trill. That night Jorah seemed to recognize Jon's attire and the Valyrian steel sword at his side and spoke first. "You from the north of Westeros. Who are you? You look a bit familiar." Jon did not answer the knight's question. "Where did you obtain the Valyrian steel sword you're carrying?" Jorah did not answer his question but instead asked in an urgent voice. "This sword was given to me by an old man to use. Now is not the time to discuss these things. After we finish talking here we can chat about the sword." Jorah looked at everyone present, suddenly realizing that this was not the place to discuss these things, and suddenly fell silent. Jon waited for a while, and seeing that he didn't ask anything else, he looked around and spoke to the Magisters of Pentos. "I have received news that some members of my house have survived." Chapter 24, Identity Exposed. On the way to Pentos, Jon had long prepared this explanation. He could not reveal his true identity, nor could he let House Stark be implicated, so he adopted the suggestion of Sir Alizer and pretended to be Aegon Targaryen, the son of Elia Martell, the brother who had been brutally murdered by House Lannister. "As for why I have come here," Jon stroked the scales of Coldfire and said with a smile while looking at Daenerys, "the answer is obvious." Jorah nodded, not daring to ask further. Jon asked curiously instead, "Are you a northerner?" "This is Sir Jorah Mormont," Dany replied. Sir Jorah Mormont looked very much like an old man at Castle Black. He had learned from Alizer that the Lord Commander had a son, but the old bear never spoke of him voluntarily. Now that he observed him carefully, he found that the two did indeed look very much alike. No wonder he had asked about the longsword. "Are you from House Mormont?" Suddenly remembering something, his voice turned cold. "You wouldn't happen to be that Sir Jorah I heard about in Westeros, would you? The Jorah who was exiled for selling poachers into slavery?" Jorah's expression changed, and Daenerys' eyes widened. Coldfire's gaze remained locked on Mormont. Even though she did not understand why he felt such disgust for this man, everyone held their breath, fearing to anger the dragon and her rider. "I am sorry," Jorah replied in a low voice. "I did one thing wrong. I do not like you." Jon stared at him, then turned his head to speak to Viserys. "I did not expect you to associate with such a man." Illyrio Mopades tried to ease the tense atmosphere. "We all make mistakes, do we not? But that does not prevent us from correcting them." Since Sir Jorah began serving House Targaryen, he has been dutifully serving King Viserys. Wait, did I hear that correctly? You call him king? Jon interrupted him. This made the Magister of Pentos blink involuntarily. Viserys was furious and Daenerys glanced nervously at her brother. What do you think you are doing? What are you questioning? Aegon, do you want to wake the dragon? I am the son of King Aerys, why should I not be king? Jon looked at this utterly insane uncle and felt not a shred of affection for him, especially after knowing he planned to sell Dany to Khal Drogo of the Dothraki, which filled him with extreme disgust. Coldfire sensed Aegon's inner feelings, raised her massive head, let out a low roar and bared her huge fangs, glaring at this arrogant man. Do not challenge me, Uncle Viserys, Jon warned him. I might forgive you, but my dragon will not. Viserys looked as if he might explode at any moment, but his gaze remained locked on the dragon's eyes, his body stiff, and he sat back down, trembling. Jon looked toward Jorah Mormont. Dany, is this man trustworthy? Although he is not very willing to speak of his past, she glanced at Jorah yet decided to defend him. But as far as I know, he no longer does that thing which people dislike. Jon scrutinized Jorah for a moment longer. I will trust you for now, but I will be watching you, Jorah Mormont said gratefully. Thank you for your trust, Prince Aegon. Because of the intense heat radiating from Coldfire, the tense atmosphere gradually dissipated. Forgive my bad temper, he sighed. The listeners looked up at him, perhaps sensing that he might be trying to make amends. Over the past few days I have flown all the way from the north of Westeros to Pentos, which has left me exhausted. Understandable, Your Highness. Illyrio Mopades quickly seized the opportunity to ease the atmosphere. To cover such a long distance in such a short time is truly incredible. You're truly remarkable. Indeed, I was even attacked by bandits once while Coldfire was hunting. You hurt? Dany asked with concern. A few bandits could not hurt me, I killed them easily. He answered. The girl then wiped the sweat from his forehead. I am not used to the heat here. I have always lived in the colder parts of Westeros and am accustomed to a cold climate. This heat makes me very uncomfortable, Highness. I will find suitable clothing for you as soon as possible, Magister Illyrio promised him with a smile. Jon nodded gratefully. I appreciate your thoughtfulness, Magister. A brilliant smile bloomed on the Magister's face and Jon smiled back. The tense atmosphere finally began to relax. I have been separated from my family for too many years. Viserys, Daenerys, I have always longed to see you. If you are willing to share your stories, I am willing to share mine. He wanted to give Uncle Viserys a chance. Dany had previously recounted many things from their childhood in dreams. Back then, Viserys was still a loving person who cared deeply for his sister. Perhaps a series of subsequent events had caused him to gradually become this way. If Viserys could change, he did not want to be enemies with his own kin. Viserys did not seem enthusiastic, but he nodded anyway without speaking. Daenerys' smile grew even brighter. Viserys finally regained his composure. While recounting their story, Daenerys would occasionally interject, which seemed to annoy her brother at times, but he did not show aggression toward her. Until they spoke of Daenerys' marriage to the Dothraki Khal, the smile on her face vanished. She looked like a jasmine flower that had lost its fragrance, dimming in an instant. Jon frowned. Why are you selling her? To gain the allegiance of the Dothraki. After the wedding, I will take a great army to Westeros. I will burn those shameful traitors and make them taste the fury of the true dragon. Viserys gestured excitedly, imagining the scene after conquering the continent of Westeros, his eyes flashing with unprecedented light. Why would they obey your command? Jon reminded him. Viserys was stunned by the question and froze instantly. I really do not see how you are going to convince them. Viserys pointed at Daenerys. Aegon, the last jewel of the Targaryen, is priceless to the barbarians. She is so dazzling. If we give her to Khal Drogo, he will surely serve me. Dany curled up in fear as if trying to hide from her brother. Aegon sensed her unease and narrowed his eyes. No, I will not sell a girl of House Targaryen. Highness, Illyrio Mopades tried to speak, but Aegon shook his head impatiently. Chapter 25, The History of House Targaryen. Even if you gave 1,000 women to that Khal Drogo, they would not serve you. Jon said to Viserys, who was just about to retort. You don't truly believe that by offering your sister just one woman they will follow you across the sea to Westeros, do you? The beggar king stood up excitedly. Khal Drogo gave me his word, he will keep his promise. This is not a discussion. I will not give the women of my family to anyone, whoever they may be. The wedding has already been agreed upon, Viserys protested. If we call off the engagement now, this city will suffer an attack by the Dothraki, my prince, Illyrio Mopades said hurriedly. If that Khal is foolish enough to challenge a dragon on the open plains, I will burn him and the earth alike to ashes, Jon said decisively. Illyrio Mopades pursed his lips. But they have many bows and arrows. A dangerous smile curled on Jon's lips. I would like to see if their little sticks can scratch a dragon's hide, Magister. This agreement is now void. Daenerys was so moved she was nearly in tears, but she held it back, appearing very restrained. Jon fought the urge to embrace and comfort her. In his dreams they were often in each other's arms, but there were too many people here now. Viserys raised his arms in anger. If we abandon the Dothraki, who else will serve us and how will we return to Westeros? These things can wait until after this incident is over, Jon said to him. I do not wish to argue too much with the family I have just reunited with. We shall discuss Westeros later. He picked up a piece of fruit from the table, looking at the unfamiliar food and sensed nothing wrong with it. Dany quickly took the orange, peeled it for him and then handed him the flesh. Jon took a large bite and the sourness made his whole face pucker. He couldn't help but laugh after finishing it. It seems it will take some time to get used to the food here. This drew a light chuckle from the listeners. Jon waved away a servant who came to serve, picked up another unfamiliar food and began to eat. Taste is quite good, he admitted. It was sweet and sour, unlike anything he had eaten before. Prince, we have many such foods. Illyrio Mapates promised. I will ensure you have delicious food every day here. I think it is time to tell my story to everyone present, Jon said. Ah, how exciting. How did you survive? Prince, are there others in your family who have been hidden away? The smile on Jon's face vanished. I wish there were, but unfortunately apart from those here there are none left. My mother Princess Elia was brutally murdered by the Mountain Gregor Clegane and my sister Rhaenys died at the hands of Amory Lorch. Now only I remain. Hearing this heartbreaking account again, Viserys' eyes burned with rage as did Daenerys'. Jon felt the same. He loathed those cruel people. Prince, how did you survive? Ser Jorah asked hesitantly. We heard that the Mountain smashed Prince Aegon's face against the walls of the Red Keep. Jon frowned. A few people loyal to our house swapped an infant for me and then sent me out of King's Landing. That innocent child lost his life in my stead. That was his honor. Illyrio Mapates had just begun to speak when he was silenced by the look of fury on Jon's face. His voice was dry. The child was as innocent as I was. He did not deserve such a fate. I do not even know the name of the child who died so that I might live. Magister looked at him apologetically. I should not have offended him. Please forgive me, Prince. I imagine the deaths of your father and grandfather must also make you very angry. My father, he pursed his lips, I do not wish to comment on him. He eloped with Lyanna Stark, which triggered Robert Baratheon's rebellion. What happened afterward no one knows, but my grandfather Aerys Targaryen deserved his fate. Nonsense, Viserys shouted. Jon looked at him in confusion. What did you say? Aegon. Dany frowned deeply. Our father was a great king beloved by the people. You should not speak of him like that. He stared at Dany, then looked at Viserys. Much do you know about the mad King Aerys Targaryen? Much more than you imagine, he snapped. No, I don't think you do, Jon said slowly. You must have heard of his crimes, haven't you? Everything he did. These are lies spread by our enemies. No, Viserys, Aegon shook his head. Those are not lies. Daenerys looked at Jon and her brother in confusion, then glanced at Ser Jorah behind her. Ser Jorah pursed his lips, seemingly trying to keep himself silent. What did he do? What crimes? Jon began. Whenever a Targaryen is born, the gods toss a coin in the air to choose between madness or greatness. This is the price we pay for being so closely linked to dragons. For our noble bloodline, this price is insignificant, Viserys said dismissively. For some of us perhaps, he admitted. But Aerys later became cruel and ruthless. After the defiance of Duskendale he went completely mad and took pleasure in burning people with wildfire. After Rhaegar abducted Lyanna Stark, her father and brother came to King's Landing to demand her release. Aerys arrested them, he burned Lord Rickard Stark alive and Brandon Stark was strangled while trying to save his father. This is merely one of his crimes. Color drained from Daenerys' face instantly, replaced by disbelief. Viserys was hysterically denouncing what he perceived as the injustices suffered by his father. They were traitors, they should not have questioned their king. Aerys also frequently harmed Rhaela Targaryen. Viserys, that was your mother. Viserys was speechless, his face turning pale with rage. That must be a lie. It is the truth. You have been influenced by those people in the north since you were a child, Viserys raged. You have been deceived by those traitors. I grew up living with loyalists to House Targaryen. They hid me away and they were the ones who told me these things. Then they are not loyal. Is it loyalty to keep the truth about our family from us? I have heard all the stories of our house from ancient Valyria to my namesake ancestor who conquered Westeros and even further into the past. Our house has produced many great figures, but Aerys was the maddest of them all. Look at the state we are in now. His madness nearly pushed us to the brink of extinction. Viserys did not seem to agree with his words and glared at him with hostility, but when Daenerys pushed aside the plate of food beside her, the further discussion of this topic came to an abrupt end. I think I am full, she said hoarsely. Jon did not blame her. Even he had felt sickened when he first heard of Aerys' crimes. And since Aerys was her father, it was hard to imagine how Daenerys felt hearing these things. Chapter 26, Illyrio Mapates' machinations. We have been talking for a long time and the rest of the story, Jon said, looking around at them. I need to rest now, perhaps we can continue this topic tomorrow. Illyrio Mapates nodded and snapped his fingers and the servants began to clear away. The Magister's tone was hesitant. Prince Aegon, would you be willing to return to Pentos with us and rest at my estate? Jon weighed the risks, thinking of his extraordinary danger sense, and ultimately nodded in agreement. Excellent, when we return I will have your room prepared, but what of your dragon? He smiled slightly and gently stroked her white scales. She will nest outside the city of Pentos. The city is not suitable for a dragon, too many people will disturb her. It must be forbidden for anyone to approach her. Coldfire is calm in my presence. but when I am not around, if someone gets too close, I think she is likely to kill strangers. I will convey this news to anyone who is overly curious, Illyrio Mopades assured him. Thank you very much. Jon slowly stood up and stretched. After they reached the luxurious estate, Viserys immediately found an excuse to leave. Before leaving, he said to this nephew of mysterious origins, I am going to rest first, there are many things to consider. Without waiting for a response, he left the group. Jon watched him leave vigilantly. Viserys did not dare to be too tyrannical in front of him, which he felt was mainly due to the presence of Coldfire. Now it was time to see what Viserys was like without a dragon by his side. His current skills were enough to ensure his own safety. No one could easily kill him. Illyrio Mopades also excused himself to meet with his colleagues and prepare for the banquet to be held that evening in celebration of Jon's arrival. It was an important moment for House Targaryen to gather together, and the speed at which this fat man moved far exceeded Jon's expectations. The servant led him to his room and he stopped outside the door. Daenerys had come with him, as had Ser Jorah. Dany turned to look at him. Ser Jorah, I would like to speak with Aegon alone. Jorah Mormont looked at Daenerys, then at Jon. Your Grace, are you sure you want to do this? Jon raised an eyebrow and Daenerys confirmed. I will be fine. Jorah spoke again. Forgive my presumption, Princess Daenerys, but he may be your nephew, yet we do not know his intentions. That is understandable, Jon replied. This made the knight blink in surprise. Ser Jorah, I appreciate your loyalty, but I would never harm Dany. He finally nodded slowly. Your Grace, if you need me, you only need to call. Jon watched the knight depart, feeling somewhat displeased. He did not know why Jorah was so insistent on staying by Daenerys' side. He understood Jorah being vigilant against strangers, but he had already questioned his princess's decision twice. Putting other thoughts aside for the moment, Jon walked into his new bedroom. The room before his eyes was very luxurious, with various precious decorations all around. In the center was a large bed covered with comfortable sheets, and at the foot of the bed were several sets of clothing unique to Pentos. The curtains blocked the light of the setting sun. The room was airy and bright, very comfortable. On the bed lay light and comfortable clothing. It must have been sent by Illyrio Mopades' order beforehand. Truly a thoughtful person. After Dany sent away a servant who was finishing up the final touches, she closed the door behind her. Jon turned to face her. Now finally there were no outsiders. Her shoes tapped crisply against the floor as Daenerys strode towards him. Dany and Jon embraced tightly, with such force that it felt hard to breathe. He rested his chin on the top of her head and took a deep breath. She smelled of flowers. I am afraid that I am still in a dream, she said with a trembling voice, her shirt dampened by her tears. You really came to get me? You ever doubt me? Jon asked with a smile. I was afraid before, afraid that you were just someone I had imagined. Daenerys raised her hand to stroke his cheek. Her fingers were soft and warm and her eyes were filled with tears. Jon also raised his hand to wipe away her tears, gently cupping her face. This time we will not have to be separated again. Jon, say it again, she whispered. Dany, I am staying, I will not leave you again. In that happy moment, Daenerys Targaryen and Jon embraced each other for the first time outside of a dream. On the other side, Illyrio Mopades was now at a loss. He had experienced much in his life and had seen many things. He began collaborating with Varys after a chance encounter in their youth. Varys, known as the Spider, was now King Robert's master of whisperers. In recent years, the reason he had been sheltering the Targaryen siblings was to conveniently monitor them closely. This served both his own interests and those of Varys. A dead Targaryen had no value, he needed them alive. He was a merchant, and to gain greater profits, he had formulated many plans, but yesterday's incident had completely overturned all his preparations. That was a legendary dragon, a dragon that had been missing for hundreds of years, appearing before his eyes. This was truly big news. She flew over the city, even larger than he had imagined, breathing white flames and majestically displaying its terrifying power. And a young man claiming to be Aegon Targaryen had appeared from the dragon's back. He looked so tall and robust. Aegon Targaryen, Prince Rhaegar's last surviving child. This was not the first time someone had claimed to be a long-lost royal descendant, all for the purpose of swindling others of their wealth. Illyrio Mopades was long accustomed to this. Sometimes he would even encourage such behavior, which of course was also for his own benefit. He had prepared plenty of evidence to deal with such imposters. No matter who they were, he could expose them within minutes. But what he had encountered today was different from anything in the past. A Jon who rode a dragon. The existence of the dragon itself proved his Dragonlord bloodline. The arrival of his dragon would surely change many things. He needed to consider a few things. The previous preparations needed to be halted. If they played it right, this Jon could perhaps become everything he and Varys had dreamed of. They had to treat this young man with caution. If things did not go well, this newly appeared Dragonlord might become their nightmare. If that dragon was truly as powerful as the legend said, it would be a terrifying presence on the battlefield. Chapter 27. The Magister's gift. The morning in Pentos carried a humid warmth. When Magister Illyrio stepped into the hall, the banquet was already set. Jon and Daenerys sat together, across from each other at the table, dining and conversing in low tones, with light laughter breaking out from time to time. Ser Jorah stood behind Daenerys, guarding her vigilantly as always. Seeing Daenerys' relaxed and happy smile, Illyrio Mopatis felt secretly surprised. Over these years, Daenerys had mostly been timid and introverted, with Viserys' volatile temper being the main culprit. In the past 2 weeks, the upcoming marriage to Khal Drogo had made her even more listless. But today she looked like a flower bathing in the sunlight once again. Hearing footsteps, Jon's gaze quickly turned to him. Illyrio Mopatis couldn't help but shiver. Those deep gray eyes were nearly black, bright and sharp, as if examining everything, making him look like a wolf. Magister Illyrio, please join us. Daenerys greeted him proactively, looking confident and charming. Thank you for the invitation, I would be very pleased to. He nodded slightly and looked at Jon. Jon's gaze remained on him. It is an honor to dine with you. We officially introduced ourselves yesterday. Illyrio Mopatis stepped forward and snapped his fingers, and servants quickly brought food and wine. I'm very pleased you could grace my estate, Prince Aegon. I hope this food is to your taste. Thank you for your hospitality. The food is delicious. Jon nodded in acknowledgement and responded with a smile. Your protection of Daenerys and Viserys has been a great service to my house. Haha, protecting the Targaryen royals is the greatest honor of my life. Illyrio Mopatis laughed heartily. He carefully examined the loose silk shirt and trousers Jon was wearing and complimented him. Prince, this attire suits you well. You look very regal. I hope you like it. It is very comfortable to wear, but I am not used to such thin clothing. Jon shifted uncomfortably. I suppose I will get used to it after a while, as I will not be returning to Westeros anytime soon. Forgive my presumption, Prince, but where were you hiding in Westeros? Jon pursed his lips and thought for a moment before saying, deep in the north. I cannot tell you the specific location. I do not wish to expose the people who saved me and raised me. Magister Illyrio raised his glass and took a sip. Apologies, Prince, I should not have asked you about these things. You are truly a cautious person. Jon also raised his glass and took a sip, saying seriously, I said yesterday that I do not trust others easily. I have no intention of offending you, but I will not answer this question. Of course, Prince, I hope my question did not offend you. Jon's shoulders relaxed a little. Thank you, however, I can tell you that I spent most of my time beyond the wall. This truly caught Illyrio Mopatis by surprise, and he looked astonished. North of the wall, it is said that the weather in that land is extremely harsh and it is not easy for anyone to survive there. That is hardly a good place to hide. There was really no other choice. Coldfare's size is growing day by day, and it is no longer suitable for her to stay in densely populated areas, he said in a deep voice. I took her back to the north, and we usually reside there. I only venture south on rare occasions to see the family that raised me and gather news of the world. It was only during my most recent trip south that I learned Daenerys and Viserys were still alive. It seems your guardians went to great lengths to ensure you were not discovered by the world, Illyrio Mopatis said. Jon shrugged. I am still alive, that much is beyond doubt. What is it like north of the wall? The furthest north I have ever been is Bravos, Daenerys asked curiously, her eyes sparkling with a light Illyrio Mopatis had never seen before. She was usually so introverted and timid, but now with Jon she had completely changed, which was truly surprising. Jon said softly, the cold there drills into your bones. If you don't find a warm cave before dark, you might never wake up again. There are wildlings wandering about. They are familiar with every inch of that land, and I have been ambushed by them. My heavens, wildlings? That's right, that time was very dangerous. They almost killed me, he admitted. I only had time to kill one and the other slashed my clothes. In the end, Coldfire appeared and saved me. Daenerys listened with great interest, but when he mentioned being injured she became somewhat worried. Jon suddenly laughed. She is smart and powerful. You should have seen her then. She flew down and knocked over trees, blocking the other wildlings. Prince, if I may ask, how did your dragon hatch? He frowned and answered the question. I truly wish I knew. I do not know what magic my father used. Unless he told me himself, no one could know. He has been dead for over a decade. What a pity. Do your guardians know nothing either? No, it was Valyrian magic. I am very certain of that, he said in a low voice, his gaze unfocused as he looked into the distance. They say that the dragon established a bond with me the moment she was born. She is like my sister, or rather my closest companion. Illyrio Mopatis stroked his forked beard. What a pity, if only we knew how to do it. Jon frowned and glanced at him. Magister, why do you ask this question? What is your purpose? He cleared his throat. Among the wedding gifts I originally intended to give Princess Daenerys there were 3 petrified dragon eggs. Upon hearing this, Daenerys took a deep breath, and even a flash of light appeared in Jon's eyes as he asked, where are they now, and where did you obtain them? From the Shadowlands, Illyrio Mopatis replied. Of course, since you have called off the engagement, I think I should give them to you as a symbol of our friendship. I have no use for them anyway. He beckoned a servant over and instructed, tell the steward to bring the chest containing the dragon eggs from the gift room. While they waited for the servant to carry out the task, they took the opportunity to enjoy their meal. After viewing the dragon eggs, Illyrio Mopatis still needed to discuss some other matters with Jon. He thought to himself that canceling the wedding would inevitably enrage Khal Drogo, and within a few days the Dothraki riders would come to attack the city. The servants soon returned carrying a black chest, placing it carefully on the table. Illyrio waved for them to attend to other matters and then opened the chest himself, revealing the 3 petrified eggs inside. Chapter 28. 3 dragon eggs. The one on the left was deep green with bronze flecks, the second was white and gold with gold stripes, the third was black with scarlet ripples and swirls. Illyrio picked up the green egg first and handed it to Jon. After carefully taking the dragon egg, Jon examined it closely, feeling as if it were filled with vitality. Illyrio then gave the black egg to Daenerys in the same manner. The white and gold egg remained in the box. I have never seen a dragon egg before, Daenerys said softly after taking it. It is my first time truly seeing one as well, Jon nodded, his fingers gently brushing over the green egg. Wonder where my father found Coldfire. Illyrio sat back down in his chair. There are very few known dragon eggs in this world. Finding these few was the limit of my ability, and I do not even know if they can still be hatched. They look truly beautiful. Holding the egg, Jon exchanged a subtle glance with Daenerys. It is a pity they have already petrified, they can only be kept as beautiful curiosities. Illyrio frowned. It seems the only living true dragon left in this world is the one belonging to your highness, Jon said in a low voice. What a pity. If they could be hatched, we would have a few more dragons just like our ancestors. Illyrio observed the 2 of them secretly for a moment, detecting nothing unusual before setting down the white and gold dragon egg with a hint of disappointment. Do you need me to invite Prince Viserys to come and see these dragon eggs? He needed to probe Jon's attitude, so he deliberately proposed it. He did not believe Viserys could hatch a dragon, so it did not matter if he let him see them. Jon seemed to snap out of a daze, frowning and shaking his head. Better not disturb him, I will invite him when he is free. Daenerys nodded. They placed the eggs back into the box. She did not close the lid but stood there, her fingertips gently brushing over the petrified eggshells. I really wish we knew more about Valyrian magic. How exactly did the ancient dragon lords hatch their dragons? Perhaps we can take them to see Coldfire another day. Jon suddenly remembered his dragon. She might have a way. Really? Curiosity was undisguised on Illyrio face. Who knows more about hatching dragon eggs than a dragon? This was certainly a reasonable point. Illyrio stuffed a few grapes into his mouth and looked at Jon opposite him with a solemn expression. Your Highness, I would have liked to continue discussing these interesting topics with you, but I truly cannot ignore the threat Pentos is about to face. Once Khal Drogo learns that you have annulled his marriage contract with Princess Daenerys, he will surely be furious. Daenerys' body trembled visibly, and her originally bright complexion instantly drained of all color. Illyrio who had been keeping an eye on Jon, caught a certain emotion in the depths of his eyes, a storm suddenly brewing in those calm gray eyes. Regarding that, I can assure you, Magister, Jon's voice was steady and powerful. If Khal Drogo leads his colossal to attack this city, I will protect it together with my dragon. Highness, forgive me for speaking plainly. Illyrio leaned forward. Do you believe that you and a single dragon can stop thousands or even tens of thousands of Dothraki screamers? Illyrio caught a flash of cold light in Jon's eyes. Magister Illyrio, have you ever seen an ant defeat an elephant? Jon's tone was calm, yet carried an unquestionable strength. To a dragon on an open plain, no matter how many people the opponent has, the only result is being burned. You have heard of the deeds of our Targaryen ancestors, have you not? After hearing the dragon rider's words, the Magister's expression relaxed a little. Story of the Conqueror is known to all, he said slowly. Aegon I once rode 3 dragons and crushed the combined armies of House Lannister and House Gardener on the battlefield, but back then there were 3 dragons and you only have one, even if your dragon is massive. Is enough, Jon said indifferently. The Dothraki do not know how to fight against dragons, they have no experience. The appearance of a dragon will panic their warhorses, and when their formation is in chaos, I will be able to crush them completely from the air. Jon glanced at Illyrio again. However, I would like to learn more about this call and his screamers. I have only seen many things in books. For the specific situation, I must rely on you, Magister. Illyrio mused to himself that the person who taught this young man combat skills must be an expert. He was not just empty talk about war, he knew how to weigh strategy and leverage advantages. As for whether he and his dragon had truly been tested in actual combat, that was another matter. At least for now, his fundamentals seemed quite solid. Well, tomorrow I will gather a few people to tell you all about Khal Drogo and his screamers, Illyrio said with a smile. Jon nodded. If your highness has rested well, why not go out for a walk? The Magister suggested. This is a city completely different from Westeros. Jon nodded in agreement. I am quite curious about this city and was planning to go out for a stroll. Having said that, he turned to the knight standing sternly behind Daenerys. But before that, I would like to spar with Sir Jorah first. I have not had a chance to practice swordsmanship for a long time. Jorah blinked in surprise, then bowed. If your highness is interested, I am at your service anytime. It is my honor to spar with your highness. Daenerys finally closed the lid of the box. She had remained silent while they were discussing the Dothraki. I want to go see Viserys. He hasn't shown his face for a long time. Illyrio Mopatis had long since given up on Viserys and was even wary of him. He knew that Viserys had brought a woman back to his room last night, undoubtedly wanting to use this to vent the anxiety in his heart. The Magister had originally planned to give this woman to Daenerys as a handmaiden. The handmaiden's name was Dori. Her duty was not only to serve her mistress, but also to teach the young princess how to be a qualified wife. She had grown up in the pleasure houses of lies, well-versed in the arts of seduction, socializing, and reading people. She was fair-haired and blue-eyed, and while her looks did not compare to Daenerys Targaryen, she was very much to Viserys' taste, and presumably they were still dallying in the room at this moment. Illyrio Mopatis had previously sent many women to relieve Viserys' lust. Long before the preparations for the marriage between Daenerys and Khal Drogo, Viserys had long coveted his own sister. Daenerys was becoming increasingly beautiful, and the Magister had to ensure that the man of House Targaryen would not do anything out of line to his own sister. Khal Drogo would never be happy about his wife being touched by others, but now none of that mattered anymore. What truly worried him was that Viserys clearly did not intend to appear before this nephew of mysterious origin, and judging by Jon's expression, he was equally wary of this uncle. Illyrio Mopatis made up his mind that from now on he must send people to monitor Viserys closely and never let him act recklessly. Chapter 29, Persuasion. Ser Jorah, please go to the courtyard and wait for me. I would like to speak with Dany and Magister Illyrio alone, Jon said, looking at Jorah. Jorah hesitated for a moment, then nodded without asking any further questions, turned and walked away quickly. Magister Illyrio was somewhat surprised by this sudden request, but he did not refuse. He waved his hand, signaling all the servants in the room to withdraw. Once the door was closed again, leaving only the three of them in the room, Jon first glanced at Magister Illyrio, then looked at Daenerys. Tell me the truth, how is Viserys doing now? You know him better than I do. Daenerys subconsciously looked at Magister Illyrio, and seeing that he had no intention of speaking, she said softly, My brother is very angry right now. He feels that you ruined his plans and caused him to lose everything, so he has been locking himself in his room, throwing tantrums. Jon had actually already known some things about Viserys from his dragon dreams, but those were merely dreams after all. He wanted to know the situation in reality now, therefore he looked at Magister Illyrio and asked in a deep voice, was he like this before? When he is angry, does he ever hurt Daenerys? Magister Illyrio looked troubled. He glanced at Daenerys first before speaking slowly. Your Grace, as far as I know, Prince Viserys has indeed laid hands on the princess out of anger in the past. It is just that the princess never admitted it, and it was not my place to say anything. Later, fearing for the princess's safety, I hired Ser Jorah and put him in charge of protecting her. Jon was silent for a moment, then looked at Daenerys. Stay by my side today, or at least do not go anywhere alone until he has calmed down. Aegon, isn't that a bit? Daenerys just wanted to say something, but Jon shook his head gently. I know Viserys has had a very difficult time over these years, and I know he has lost many things. Regardless, I will not allow anyone to hurt you. I'm willing to give him a chance. After all, he is my uncle and I do not want to be his enemy. But if he continues to hurt family, I will no longer tolerate it. Magister Illyrio pursed his lips slightly. He had to admit that Jon was right. With Jon's appearance, everything Viserys originally possessed had come to an end. While this was certainly cruel for Viserys, it was also the first step Jon had to take. After all, a house cannot have two rulers at the same time. But this did not mean that Viserys was not dangerous. On the contrary, a person who has lost everything and is filled with anger is often the most dangerous. By comparison, the young Targaryen prince before him remained calm, and even knowing some things, he was not in a rush to deal with the problem. Magister Illyrio did not know how long this restraint could last, but at least for now it seemed more like the quality a ruler should have than anger. I'm afraid it will take a few days for his anger to subside. Magister Illyrio said calmly. I will have people keep an eye on him. I will never let him have another chance to hurt the princess, nor will I let him hurt anyone else. In the past, he had never truly taken Viserys to heart. Because in his view, that exiled prince had long since had no future. Now, although Magister Illyrio did not think anything would change, he would not oppose Jon's willingness to give his uncle a chance to mend his ways. At least this showed that the young man before him would not easily decide a person's life or death just because he possessed power. For a future ruler, this was not necessarily a bad quality to have. After ending the conversation, Magister Illyrio watched the young man and woman walk toward the courtyard. He stood there in thought for a moment until a crisp sound of metal clashing came from the direction of the courtyard. It seemed that the sparring match between Jon and Ser Jorah had begun. Magister Illyrio turned around slowly. While the two were sparring, he should also go see Viserys. The Dothraki issue had not yet been resolved, and there were still many things that needed to be rearranged before dealing with the coming storm. Thinking of this, he stepped out of the hall. The sun outside the window had risen, casting a faint white light on the flagstone path in the courtyard. The distance, the crisp sound of wooden swords clashing could be heard from time to time, mixed with the footsteps of servants, echoing continuously throughout the mansion. Magister Illyrio made his way to the door of Viserys' bedchamber, stopped, and raised his hand to knock gently on the door. The room was quiet, with no response. He knocked again, this time with a bit more force. A moment later, a stream of incoherent cursing finally came from inside, followed by heavy footsteps. The door was yanked open. Viserys stood behind the door, his silver-gold hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and his expression so gloomy that it seemed he would explode at any moment. The room was in a mess, with wine flagons and wooden cups scattered on the floor. On the bed, Dory was tightly wrapped in a blanket, curled up in a corner with a fearful expression, appearing cautious even when just lifting her head. "What is it?" Viserys' voice was cold and hoarse, like a beast on the verge of losing control, ready to devour anyone at any moment. "Your Grace," Magister Illyrio's tone remained respectful. "I just came to see if you were well. Breakfast has been prepared, and if you— I am not hungry, as you wish." Magister Illyrio nodded slightly, swept his gaze around the room, and then let it fall back on Viserys' face. "However, Your Grace, there is something I feel I should tell you. Prince Aegon mentioned you just now." Viserys' face darkened instantly. "What did he say?" "He said he hopes to give you a chance." "Chance?" Viserys laughed coldly, as if he had heard some kind of joke. "By what right does he give me a chance? I am the true king. Who knows where he popped out from? Does he think that just because he rides a dragon he can take everything that belongs to me?" "Your Grace," Magister Illyrio said softly, "but he does indeed possess a dragon." "I am also of the blood of the dragon," Viserys roared suddenly, his voice sharp and nearly out of control. "Sooner or later I will also have a dragon of my own. Before he appeared I was the only male heir of House Targaryen, and now everyone revolves around him, treating me like heir." Magister Illyrio did not answer immediately, but simply watched him quietly. Viserys' hands were trembling slightly, and the anger in his eyes was almost uncontrollable. After a moment of silence, Magister Illyrio spoke slowly. "Your Grace, anger cannot help you win back everything you have lost. If you are willing to reconcile with Prince Jon, you will still be an important member of House Targaryen. Since he is willing to give you a chance, it shows that he still values the bonds of blood. If you insist on being his enemy—" "You threatening me?" Viserys stared at him intensely, his eyes cold. "Of course not." Magister Illyrio bowed slightly, his tone remaining humble. "Only hope that House Targaryen will not shed any more blood." Viserys' pupils constricted slightly. For that instant fear flashed across his eyes, but it was quickly completely covered by anger again. Out, he slammed the door shut. Bang! A dull thud echoed through the corridor. Magister Illyrio stood quietly outside the door, not knocking again. He sighed softly and slowly turned to leave. This conversation had yielded no results. At least for now, it seemed that Viserys still could not let go of his throne, nor could he let go of the resentment in his heart. One can only hope that he will not be foolish enough to actually provoke that young dragon rider. Such people are often more dangerous than the anger itself. Chapter 30. Jorah Mormont. The sun was blazing in the courtyard, the stone floor bleached white by the heat. A few palm trees cast mottled shadows, and the air carried the distinct salty scent of the sea. Jorah Mormont stood in the center of the training ground, holding a practice sword. Jon held another practice sword, flexed his wrist slightly, then raised the blade, assuming the most basic of opening stances. "Please, sir," Jorah nodded. He took a slow step forward and thrust his practice sword straight out. The strike was not fast, it felt more like a probe, yet the next moment his pupils contracted slightly. Jon did not raise his sword to block. He simply shifted half a step to the left, letting the blade graze past his body, while his own sword stopped less than an inch from Jorah's shoulder. Had it been a real sword, blood would have been drawn. "Continue." Jon withdrew his longsword, his expression remaining calm. The disdain on Jorah's face vanished completely. He took a deep breath and reset his stance. This time he held nothing back. The sword came sweeping horizontally with a whistling sound, followed immediately by rapid changes in technique: downward chops, diagonal thrusts, backhanded slashes. Each strike was faster than the last, his movements steady and fierce, bearing the marks of years of battlefield combat. A series of metallic clashing sounds erupted in the courtyard. Practice swords clashed repeatedly, the sounds crisp and rapid. Jorah became increasingly serious with every exchange. Yet the more serious he became, the deeper his shock grew. Jon used no flashy techniques. Every parry was perfectly positioned. Every counterattack landed precisely at his openings, forcing him to retract his blade to defend himself. The boy seemed to be able to see through his moves before he even made them. The feeling was extremely strange. It wasn't that Jon was faster, nor was he stronger. It was that just as Jorah prepared to change his attack, the other was already waiting there. After a few rounds, fine beads of sweat began to seep from Jorah's forehead. His breathing began to grow heavy. Conversely, Jon's breathing remained steady, his footwork without the slightest disorder. After another clash of swords, Jorah exerted force using the recoil to step back half a pace, then stomped heavily and charged again. This was the head-on suppression that the Knight of Bear Island excelled at, 3 consecutive strikes heavy and powerful. The first strike slashed toward his shoulder. The second strike aimed straight for his chest. The third strike took advantage of the momentum to sweep across his waist. Jon pivoted, nimbly evading the first strike, and used his own sword to flick the second strike aside. Before the third strike could even fully land, he had already stepped into Jorah's guard. The movement was so fast it left no time to react. The tip of the blade stopped steadily at Jorah's throat, 1 inch, not a hair more, not a hair less. The courtyard fell silent instantly. Jorah froze, his right hand holding the sword suspended in midair, unable to bring it down for a long time. Sweat trickled down his cheek. He had lost, and he had lost without any suspense. That's enough. Jon was the first to withdraw his sword, stepping back. Only then did Jorah exhale, lowering his practiced sword and shaking his head with a bitter smile. I lost, your grace. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. When he looked at Jon again, his eyes held a completely different expression. The exchange had lasted barely dozens of heartbeats. Yet these few moments made him feel as if he had been facing an old knight who had spent decades immersed in swordsmanship. That composure, that judgment, and that near-instinctive combat awareness were not something a 16-year-old boy should possess. Jon set the practiced sword aside, picked up a cup of water brought by a servant, took a sip, and looked at Jorah again. Know a lot about you. This sentence made Jorah stiffen slightly. He knew it would come eventually. Jon said slowly, Lord of Bear Island. Participated in the Greyjoy Rebellion, later exiled from Westeros for selling poachers into slavery. He spoke calmly, without any reproach, but the more composed he was, the heavier Jorah felt. Jon looked at him quietly. Know all of this. I want to hear it from you. Why? The courtyard fell silent again. Jorah lowered his head, staring at his rough hands. After a long time he let out a slow breath. Because of stupidity. His voice was very low, and because of greed. He did not make excuses for himself. Bear Island was barren. House Mormont had not been wealthy for generations, but as it happened, he had married a wife who loved a life of luxury. To satisfy her, he constantly hosted banquets, bought jewelry, and maintained a facade of decency that far exceeded what Bear Island could afford. Gold flowed away like water, debt piled up higher and higher, until later when he captured a few poachers. According to the laws of the North, they should have faced judgment by House Stark. But at that very moment, a slave trader from Tyrosh found him. The price the other party offered was enough to pay off most of his debts. Jorah closed his eyes. I was tempted. That day, I didn't just sell a few poachers. I also sold the honor that House Mormont had accumulated over hundreds of years. By the time Eddard came with men to arrest me, I had already fled Bear Island with my wife. Gold always spends faster than it is earned. Not long after, she left me and went off with a Lysine merchant. Wind blew through the courtyard. Jorah was silent for a long time. Later I drifted around Essos, working as a sellsword and escorting goods for merchants. Later still, Illyrio Mapades found me and had me protect Princess Daenerys and Prince Viserys. He looked up. From that day on I have remained by her side. Jon was silent for a moment, seemingly digesting this information. Then you must also be aware that Viserys hit her. Jorah's spine stiffened instantly. Your Grace, I don't mean to blame you. Jon raised a hand to stop what he was about to say. I know that as a knight, you might not have been able to stop a brother from laying hands on his own sister. But from today on, I do not wish for such things to happen again. I will do everything in my power to protect Her Highness, no matter who wants to harm her. There was a near oath-like seriousness in Jorah's voice. Jon looked at him, a rare, almost relaxed expression flashing through those deep gray eyes. Then we have at least reached an agreement on this matter. He set down the water cup and looked toward the direction outside the courtyard. In the distance came the sounds of servants preparing lunch. The sun in Pentos remained blazing, and the chirping of cicadas came intermittently from the trees outside the wall. Accompany me to see Coldfire, he suddenly said. She should be hungry and she hasn't formally met you yet. He wanted to let Coldfire observe this person to see if he was worthy of his trust. Many years ago, he discovered that Coldfire seemed able to sense the hostility of others. When danger approached, the White Dragon would always be aware of it before him. As for the reason, Jon still did not understand it to this day. Jorah was stunned for a moment. Your Grace means, let me go see that dragon. She won't hurt you. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Jon's mouth. As long as you don't intend to hurt me. This sounded like a joke, but Jorah knew very well that it was not entirely a joke. He gripped the hilt of his sword, then released it and finally nodded. I will accompany you, Your Grace. Two walked out of the courtyard side by side, leaving the deep sword mark imprinted on the wooden post of the practice ground.